It is. All right, so with that, here's Becky Laboy.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Laboy, and I'm the Education Outreach Specialist with Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And a special thanks to the Native Plant Society of New Jersey, specifically to the Southeast Chapter leaders, Barbara and Steve Fiedler, and Jesse and Jack Connor for inviting me to present my program this evening about soil. So I'm actually going to hide my thumbnail video, and I'm going to stop my video so your full attention will be on the information. So in case you are not familiar with the soil district, let me share a little bit about what it is and why it exists. You may be familiar with the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, which lasted about a decade and is sometimes referred to as the Dirty 30s. And this was a period of drought and severe dust storms. And it was caused by major agricultural damage to American prairie lands and exacerbated by decades of extensive mismanaged farming and agricultural practices, because farmers in that era, they didn't know yet or understand really the importance of crop rotation or cover crops to manage soil fertility. Also, the deep plowing of the topsoil, it killed off the natural vegetation that normally keeps the soil in place and traps moisture even during dry periods and high winds. Also, wheat crops were in high demand during World War I, which further exhausted the topsoil, and overgrazing stripped the western plains of virtually all other cover. So as a result, the soil dried up and turned to dust. And it started blowing in large dark clouds across the plains and even across the country, and even reaching the East Coast. And that's when Congress realized that the loss of soil, and I quote, is a menace to the national welfare, unquote. And it directed the Secretary of Agriculture to establish the Soil Conservation Service, the SCS, as a permanent agency in the United States Department of Agriculture. And in 1994, Congress changed the SCS name to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the NRCS, to better reflect the more broadened scope of the agency's concerns, which now include water and natural resource conservation efforts. And the Ocean County Soil Conservation District, OCSCD, we originated in 1952, and we are one of 15 soil conservation districts in New Jersey that all work together to implement what's called the New Jersey Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Act. And that governs various aspects of new development and soil disturbance. So Ocean County Soil Conservation District is a subdivision of the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. However, we are locally governed and we operate within the boundaries of Ocean County. And your county has a soil district as well, so I encourage you all to find out which one it is. And the Ocean County Soil Conservation District has also developed an education program designed to bring awareness about the importance of natural resources and their conservation, and to promote environmental stewardship throughout our Barnegat Bay watershed here in Ocean County, whose ecological boundaries share almost exactly the same footprint as Ocean County's political borders. Partnerships and combined efforts with agencies such as the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the Barnegat Bay Partnership, and Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Ocean County have all served to enhance our education efforts. And I love my job. And two of my favorite responsibilities include offering educational programs to both children and adults, and to work with our Barnegat Bay Partnership colleagues, one of which is Karen Walzer, to install and promote native plant demonstration gardens with the goal of inspiring others to implement conservation practices in their own home. So your role as a native plant gardener or native plant enthusiast, who are all joining us this evening, your role is really important, and I think being a gardener is a fun way for you to be an environmental steward within your own community. So think about this question. What is at the root of your garden or landscape? Healthy soil is our goal. So healthy gardens start with healthy soil. In fact, healthy soil is at the root of all life on Earth. And today's program is titled, Don't Treat Your Soil Like Dirt. And if there is one thing that you take away from this program, I hope it will be a renewed appreciation and understanding of your soil. Soil is and should be the gardener's friend. Get to know your soil. Treat it with kindness and understanding. And you and your garden will be rewarded, because healthy soil is at the root of our planet Earth. So I've mentioned the words healthy soil a few times already. Only living things can have health. So viewing soil as a living ecosystem reflects a fundamental shift in the way we care for our planet's soil and the life that depends on it. Soil is not just an inert growing medium, but rather it's teeming with life that provides the foundation of an elegant symbiotic ecosystem. Soil is an ecosystem that can be managed by gardeners to perform 5 essential functions. Number 1, to sustain plant and animal life both above and below the surface by providing a diverse physical, chemical, and biological environment for the exchange of water and nutrients and energy and air. Number 2, soil can regulate the distribution of rain or irrigation water between infiltration, the water going into the ground, and runoff, the water running off the soil. And soil regulates the flow and storage of water and solutes. And the solutes can include nitrogen, phosphorus, pesticides, and other nutrients and compounds that are dissolved in the water. And with proper and healthy functioning, soil partitions water for groundwater recharge and for use by plants and soil animals. And number 3, soil acts as a filter to protect the quality of water, air, and other resources. Toxic compounds or excess nutrients can actually be degraded by soil or otherwise made unavailable to plants and animals. And number 4, soil manages nutrient cycling. So soil actually stores and moderates the release of and the cycling of nutrients. And during biogeochemical processes, chemical, physical, biological, nutrients can be transformed into plant available forms. And then they're held in the soil to be utilized by plants or even lost to air and water. And finally, number 5, soil has the ability to maintain its very porous structure to allow passage of air and water, withstand erosive forces, and provide a medium for plant roots. And soil provides support for human structures and protects our archaeological treasures. Soil has had an intimate relationship with all other natural resources on our planet for billions of years. Soil interacts with both living and non-living resources, from basic elements such as carbon and oxygen, to sunlight, rocks and minerals, water, bacteria, fungus, microorganisms, macroorganisms, animals, plants, and humans. Soil is an integral and essential part of Earth's processes and systems, including the water cycle, the phosphorus cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, temperature and climate, ocean currents, solar energy systems, electrical systems, magnetic forces, and on and on. Soil is at the root of all life on Earth. Soil is actually formed by 5 major factors. Parent material, the primary materials from which all soils are formed. Climate, temperature and moisture affect rates of biological activity and chemical reactions. Topography and relief. The location of the soil in a landscape can affect how climatic processes impact it. Organisms. Each soil has a unique combination of microbes, plants, animals, and humans acting upon it. And time. All of the other factors assert themselves over a period of time, hundreds and thousands of years. New soils increase in depth through deposition of minerals and organic matter. So layers in the soil, called horizons, show the development of soil over time. And the influence of all of these 5 major factors varies from place to place, but the combination of all 5 factors will determine the kind of soil developing in any given place and at any given time. So the formation of soil in New Jersey is quite diverse based on our geographic location, and that's because our state's geologic history is quite diverse. So you all may know that New Jersey is divided into 4 physiographic provinces, and a physiographic province is a geographic region with distinct landscape characteristics, and that's termed geomorphology, so geo meaning earth, and morph meaning form. So these different regions share common distinct rock types and other geologic characteristics. And many physiographic provinces are further subdivided into subregions and are commonly associated with specific ecological communities. So New Jersey has the ridge and valley in the north, the highlands, the Piedmont, and the coastal plain. And you can see on this map of the geologic history of New Jersey how the boundaries of the physiographic regions overlap with the different rock formations. And the parent materials of New Jersey soil comes from formations of rocks caused by orogeny, which is the folding of the Earth's crust, as well as pressure and heat. And for the ridge and valley, it was formed about 500 million years ago through orogeny, which is mountain building. And it is composed of conglomerate, sandstone, quartzite, and slate, which all resist erosion, allowing for the high elevations, but also shale and limestone, which easily erode, creating the valleys. And if you are visiting us from the highlands today, the highlands is our most ancient province. It was formed during the Precambrian era, between 1 billion and 750 million years ago. Melting and recrystallization of sedimentary rocks were deeply buried. They were subject to pressure and high temperatures, creating what are called metamorphic rocks, such as granite, gneiss, which is G-N-E-I-S-S, pronounced nice, schist, and marble. So the granites and the gneiss resist erosion and create the highlands. And then belts of exposed sedimentary rock weathered away to create valleys and streams. If you're from the Piedmont was created by a series of faults, and the series of faults actually separate the Piedmont from the highlands. Sedimentary sandstone, shale, and conglomerate create a broad lowland, and that's interlaced with igneous basalt and diabase, which create ridges and uplands formed during the Jurassic and Triassic ages. The coastal plain, that's where I live. This province consists of sediment, which ranges in age from the Cretaceous period to the Holocene epoch, which is between 135 million years ago, all the way up to the present. And sediment consists of quartzite sand, clay, green sand, marl, and gravel, which are deposited as the ocean undergoes transgression and regression, which is rising and falling. So those are the different parent materials in our different provinces. So these physiographic provinces are not confined just to our state. Whereas the state of New Jersey is defined by political boundaries, the rock formations, which is the parent material, is defined by geological boundaries. So although a small state, our geology is diverse because we are situated right there at the confluence of several physiographic provinces. And look to the map on the right, which shows the boundaries of the physiographic provinces of the New York Bight watershed. And the coastal plain extends through Long Island. The Piedmont, which is the red colored area, it begins just to the north of New Jersey and extends southwest. The highlands, which are gray colored here, starts just south of New Jersey and extends to the north throughout New England.
Hello, we're having some, oh, okay.
I'm back.
Okay.
So sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
Okay,
Did you hear me talk about the coastal plain?
no. You just finished talking about how the red goes up and down, and the highlands go all the way up into New England.
Yeah,
Okay, great, thank you.
that
I
was
apologize, everyone. We do our best. We do the best we can. All right, I'm gonna continue. All right, so let's see. So basically, these are physiographic provinces that are not confined to our state. I'm gonna move to the next slide. And this shows you kind of more a southern view. So this shows you the southerly extensions of our provinces. So you can see how they extend in a northeast to southwest direction all the way down the coast. You can see that the coastal plain extends from South Jersey. Remember, it started up in Long Island, and it extends down through Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina here on this map. And in fact, in a larger map, you can see that this region actually extends all the way down to Florida and around to Texas. And then the Piedmont province, if you recall, it started just to the north of New Jersey, and it extends all the way down into Alabama. The highlands is that really tiny sliver of mint green up at the top, also termed New England in the key on this map. And it begins just to the west of New Jersey in Pennsylvania. And recall, it continues and expands up through New England. And then the Ridge and Valley province is a thin strip that cuts through the northwestern portion of our state from New York and continues also all the way down to Alabama. So this large variety, wide variety of parent material, the influence of different time periods, the different microclimates within each province, and the fact that New Jersey is situated really nicely in the northernmost portion of this confluence. In fact, we are at the northernmost portion or the southernmost portion of 3 out of the 4 provinces that run through our state. So that really lays the foundation for a variety of soils and therefore a diversity of vegetation. So not to mention, we also have the Pine Barrens that sits right in the middle of the coastal plain, which in and of itself is also very unique with its own unique soils and climate and hydrological patterns and unique vegetation. And then this is a map painted in very broad strokes, but it also offers a glimpse into our country's geology and the parent material of all of our soils. So This fascinates me. Maybe you can get that idea because I've kind of lingered on this topic, but if this interests you as well, I encourage you to explore physiographic regions. I personally can get lost in these maps for hours. But let's explore the physical, chemical, and biological components and processes that support healthy soil and a healthy landscape and a healthy ecosystem. So, physical soil processes affect plant growth, plant diversity, root proliferation, organism movement, organic matter content, tillage, aeration, water storage and movement, resistance to erosion, and compaction. And then examples of soil properties include things like soil composition, soil texture, soil structure and aggregation, and soil color. So we'll talk about all those. But first, what is soil is the question I'm going to ask you. What is the composition of soil? So by volume, soil is 25% air, 25% water, between 45 and 47% minerals, and 3 to 5% organic matter. And just a quick question, Millie, asking if this is being re-recorded again. I'm not sure if the recording actually stopped before, and I might just have to re-record this entire thing, but that's okay. All right, so as you can see, almost 50% of all soil is basically loose, unconsolidated mineral and organic matter, and then the other 50% of soil is composed of pore space, and that can hold either water or air in varying amounts at any given time. So, soil that has more airspace than water is dry. So think about the sandy pine barrens. And then soil that has more water than air filling the pore space is wet. So we think of the beautiful swamps and bogs here on the coastal plain. So let's take another look at the organic matter component. Remember, it's really small, only 3 to 5% of soil. And organic matter, although least in overall percentage, is absolutely necessary for all soil function. Actively decomposing organic matter, which is that purple slice of the pie, and stabilized organic matter, meaning organic matter that has been completely decomposed already, which we call humus, that is the yellow slice of the pie. So they make up the bulk of organic matter. And then fresh plant and animal residue makes up about 10% of organic matter. And then finally, the living organisms make up less than 5% of the organic matter. However, their contribution to the soil health is enormous, and we're going to discuss that. So organic matter is so very important to soil health because it provides food and shelter for soil microbes. It provides pore space. It promotes soil aggregation. We'll talk about that. It promotes storage and recycling of nutrients for plant use. It improves soil structure. It increases something called the cation exchange capacity, which I'll talk about. And it increases filtration and water holding capacity. And organic matter supports not only the physical properties of soil, but also the biological and chemical processes as well. And so these processes are always changing, and it is in their synergy that allow soil to function at its greatest environmental potential. And soils that support all three of the processes, physical, chemical, and biological, are more resilient in times of natural disasters such as flooding and other extreme weather events. So I will talk about all of these processes more as we continue. So parent material is rock, basically, made of specific ingredient minerals that break down over time, and they combine with that organic matter and with the air and with water, creating soil. So as parent material is broken down into smaller mineral components, the components are of different sizes. So the size of the mineral in the soil actually gives the soil something called its texture. So depending on the size of the grain, the texture can either be sand, or the texture can be silt, or the texture can be clay. Gravel is listed here, which is greater than 2 millimeters in diameter, but it is not considered soil. Sand is between 2 millimeters and 0.05 millimeters, and each particle of sand can be seen with the naked eye. Sand particles are just small enough to hold some water, but most of what we call its gravitational water actually drains out, leaving lots of air within the pore space, and only a little what we call capillary water, meaning water that can move upwards against gravity. Because sand particles are influenced by gravity, they will settle out when mixed with water. And soil with sand particles feels gritty, as I'm sure you know when you kind of rub it between your fingers. Silt is smaller. It's between 0.05 millimeters and 0.002 millimeters in diameter. You're going to need a microscope to be able to see an individual silt particle. And like sand, these particles consist of weathered rock, only much smaller in diameter. The pore spaces between the silt particles are also much smaller in size, and they hold a lot more of that capillary water than the sand. And then particles of silt are, like sand, also influenced by gravity, and they'll settle out when mixed with water. The texture of silt, if you should rub it between your fingers, the texture is that of flour. And then finally, clay is less than 0.002 millimeters, and clay can be formed during very intense what are called hydrothermal activity, hydro-water thermal heat, hydrothermal activity, or by chemical action, such as carbonic acid weathering silicate-bearing rocks. So clay particles are readily distinguished from silt, but you're going to need an electron microscope in order to see them. They're that small. Clay particles are considered plastic. They have what's called plasticity. So they can be molded and altered when wet, as I'm sure you're aware if you've ever handled clay, and they feel somewhat slippery when rubbed between your fingers. And this is because clay particles, they absorb and they hold lots of water, which is why they're known as hydrosilicate compounds. But when they dry out, they lose their plasticity. So to kind of offer a comparison in your mind between the different texture sizes, if a clay particle were the size of a marigold seed, a silt particle would be the size of a large radish, and a sand particle would be the size of a large garden wheelbarrow. So what difference does texture make to you as a gardener? The size of the particles have everything to do with their surface area and the surface area of the pore space between the individual particles. So clay has tremendous surface area compared to sand, and clay has smaller pore spaces between the particles, but many more pore spaces in total. And in addition, organic matter is comprised of very, very minute particles. Like clay, they have lots of surface area to which plant nutrients attach, thus preventing them from leaching out. But the sand particles are too big to hold on to the nutrients, and they easily leach out of sandy soil. So soil can be either all sand, all silt, or all clay, or it can be a mixture, and we call that loam, and we call that many other things as well. And as a soil, it of course includes the pore spaces that hold the air and water, as well as the organic matter. And because the particles of sand, silt, and clay react differently, as I had mentioned, with gravity and water, you can do something called a jar test to determine the texture of your garden soil. Perhaps some of you have done that before. So fill a jar about halfway with just a small sample of your soil. Add water, shake, and let it settle for 2 days. 2 days. The largest particles, which will be the sand, will quickly fall to the bottom of the jar. The silt will react with the water, and it's going to remain suspended for about 2 hours, but will be the next layer to settle out. And then the clay particles will initially bond with the water molecules, and they're going to stay suspended for 28 to 48 hours. So once they settle out, the clay particles will be your top layer. So when your water looks clear, you can determine the approximate percentage of sand, silt, and clay based on the height of each of your layers, as you can see in that photo. You can then use the soil texture pyramid to determine the type of soil that you have. For example, this jar has a soil sample showing approximately 55% sand, 40% silt, and 5% clay, more or less, approximately. So look at the soil texture pyramid. I'm going to put a yellow dot. There it is. This combined percentage equals a sandy loam soil texture. So we find sand at the bottom, we find 55%, and we triangulate with silt and clay, the 40% silt, 5% clay, and we end up with a sandy loam texture. So in the very bottom center of that soil texture pyramid, colored in brown, is a location named Loam. Ah, the Loam. So this is traditionally the sweet spot, right? So this is traditionally what we call good garden soil, but that's a relative term. So loam can be a combination of between 22 and 52% sand, 28 and 50% silt, and 8 and 28% clay. So that's a pretty big difference between those numbers. Those of us living in the coastal plain, we will most likely have soil that occupies the left corner of the soil texture pyramid, being mostly sand, or perhaps you're living in an area in the coastal plain with more clay. And it doesn't mean that you don't have good soil. So please know that. The first step is to know the properties or characteristics of your particular soil in your yard or garden, and then find the plants that thrive in these conditions or make small adjustments. So we're going to talk more about some appropriate plants later on. So when the sand, silt, and clay particles combine together, they take on shape and they form clusters that are called aggregates. And the aggregates are held together by organic matter, good old organic matter, also by water and secretions from plants, animals, and other microbes in the soil. And the pore spaces between the aggregates provide places for retention and exchange of air and water. And then optimum aggregates have a wide range in pore size distribution. So this includes both large and medium-sized pores between the aggregates, as well as small pores within the aggregates themselves. And the way in which aggregates are arranged is referred to as soil structure. And soil scientists recognize 7 structure types, generally speaking: granular, blocky, lenticular, platy, wedge, prismatic, and columnar, and then 2 structureless types, including single grain and massive. And we are familiar with the single grain here in the coastal plain. So aggregates are bound together or torn apart by physical, chemical, and biological processes. So for example, soil particles are pushed together by changing temperatures, including freezing and thawing, as well as drying. Plant roots also push soil particles together and break them apart. Soil particles are glued together by organic residues exuded by fungi and bacteria, and by sugars excreted from plant roots. Fungal hyphae and plant roots actually stabilize aggregates. And the amount of clay and humus influences soil structure. Soil fauna, small animals, and human activity all also influence soil structure. So the key to good soil structure in the garden is organic matter and plant roots. So if you wish to optimize your soil structure, whether you have sandy soil or clay soil, add organic matter and plant a diverse array of native species to interact with the native soil fauna. Biodiversity is key as well. So the last physical characteristic we will cover is soil color. So your soil's color is based on the mineral and organic components in your soil. Soil color is influenced by physical, chemical, and biological processes taking place in the soil. A healthy gardening soil will typically be dark brown, right? Again, we think of that loam soil, which indicates lots of organic matter. Soil scientists use soil color to describe and determine soil type based on the Munsell system. So this system uses hue, which means a specific color, also value, which means lightness and darkness, as well as chroma, which is color intensity, that are arranged in these books of color chips. Soil is held next to the chips to get a visual match, and color provides a clue to the mineral content of soil. So development and distribution of color within a soil profile are part of weathering. So as rocks weather, the mineral elements oxidize. For example, iron forms small crystals of red or even yellow red. Organic matter decomposes into black humus. Also, aerobic and anaerobic environments influence soil color. And then electron exchanges between bacteria and nutrients can also influence soil color. So again, chemical, physical, and biological. Okay, let's talk about biological processes. Soil is alive. Soil microbes and soil macroorganisms, they naturally suppress pests, they decompose organic matter, and convert otherwise what we would call unusable forms of nutrients into forms that our plants can actually use. And all while creating a soil that is porous and permeable. We love soil organisms. So increased consumption of nutrients by these soil organisms actually prevents leaching, and it keeps the nutrients available to plants. So the byproducts left behind by these organisms, they act like that soil glue that increases aggregation and thereby, of course, increasing infiltration and preventing erosion. Just as we need biodiversity in our above ground ecosystems, diversity of soil organisms keeps the soil ecosystem functioning at optimum health. So 1 cup of healthy soil contains 200 billion bacteria. You heard that right, 200 billion bacteria. 1 million meters of fungi, 20 million protozoa, 100,000 nematodes, 50,000 arthropods, and 1 earthworm. So bacteria are single-celled organisms, and they feed on other organisms in the soil, and they also decompose organic matter. Some bacteria fix nitrogen, providing plants with this otherwise unavailable nutrient. Bacteria, they enhance the soil structure, they improve water infiltration and water holding ability, and they also compete with disease-causing organisms, and they also filter and degrade pollutants. But before plants can become established on fresh sediment, the bacterial community must establish first. Fungi. So 1 cup of undisturbed soil has 1 million meters of fungi. Wow. So fungi are multicellular organisms, and you're probably familiar with mushrooms and molds, and also yeast, which is a single-celled fungi. And there's many others that live underground in the soil as well. They grow as long strands or threads that we call hyphae, and they can be many yards long. They push their way through the soil particles, past roots, past rocks, and they group up into masses. You've probably seen them in your soil, called mycelium. That's a good thing. So fungi, they decompose the complex carbon compounds And they improve accumulation of organic matter. They retain nutrients in soil. They bind soil particles into those aggregates, which help, of course, increase water infiltration and soil water holding capacity. And they also compete with plant diseases. And they also decompose certain types of pollution. So bacteria and fungi are really important components of soil. Protozoa are microscopic, and they're single-celled organisms, and they eat bacteria. And the bacteria contain more nitrogen than the protozoa can utilize, so some of it is released to the plants in the form of ammonium. The protozoa prevent some pathogens from establishing on plants, and they function as a food source for nematodes. So the nematodes are small, unsegmented roundworms, and they live in the little water films in the large pore spaces in soil, and they feed on bacteria and fungi, and they also feed on other nematodes. They distribute the bacteria and the fungi through the soil as they move around, and some cause harm, as you may know, by feeding on plant roots, but there's also predatory nematodes that consume the root-feeding nematodes and even prevent their access to roots. So most kinds of soil nematodes do not parasitize plants, but they're beneficial to our plants, and they're also beneficial in the decomposition of organic matter. So the soil around small plant roots and root hairs is a particularly rich habitat for many kinds of nematodes. All right, arthropods. They're small animals such as insects and spiders and mites, and they range in size from microscopic to several inches long. And they live near the soil surface, usually in the upper 3 inches of soil, and they improve soil quality by creating structure through burrowing, through depositing fecal pellets, controlling disease-causing organisms. They stimulate the microbial activity. They enhance decomposition by shredding the organic matter into smaller pieces and mixing it in the soil. And they basically regulate the healthy soil food web populations. And our earthworm, our one earthworm. So earthworms, I'm sure you know, feed on the organic matter. And the nutrients in the organic matter are actually changed as they pass through the earthworm's gut. And the casts that the earthworms release, they are richer in the nutrients than the surrounding soil, and are in forms that are more available to plants. The burrows create passages for air and water and roots, allowing the plants to grow deeper roots, which then recharges the lower layers of soil with air. And the mucus of the skin of earthworms, as well as the castings, aid in the formation of those soil aggregates. So by increasing the organic matter content, earthworms can greatly increase the water holding capacity of soils. So encourage earthworms to come to your yard or garden by adding organic matter. So grass clippings, leaves, compost. And earthworms and other soil organisms are destroyed by tillage. Deep and frequent tillage can reduce earthworm populations by as much as 90%. And then, of course, chemicals have toxic effects on earthworm populations and other macroinvertebrates, as well as larger vertebrates. And we certainly don't want these little baby robins to be eating poisonous chemicals. So in a typical soil food web, the plants are in control. And why? Well, we know that plants make their own food from the sun's energy. So food webs start with the plants. And we often think of plants taking up nutrients through root systems and feeding the stems and leaves and flowers. However, there's a great deal of energy that results from photosynthesis in the leaves that's actually used by the plants to produce chemicals that they secrete then through their roots. And these secretions are known as exudates. And the rhizosphere is an area of interaction between the surface of a plant root, and the area surrounding it. So the root exudates are in the form of carbohydrates, which are sugars, and also proteins, which attract and grow specific beneficial bacteria and fungi that are living in the soil that actually subsist on these exudates and the cellular material that's slawed off as the plant's root tips kind of grow through the soil. And then the bacteria and fungi are then eaten by bigger microbes, such as the nematodes and protozoa. And then the waste is secreted by these microbes, which can be readily absorbed by the plant roots in this rhizosphere, which is the site of root nutrient absorption. So soil life competes for the exudates in the rhizosphere, as well as the water and mineral content. So each above ground ecosystem is supported by a different soil environment, which in turn supports a different set of soil organisms and different food webs. For example, in our coastal plain, ants are the heavy lifters in our dry, sandy pine barrens ecosystem. Can you picture an earthworm in a dry, sandy environment? It would not survive. So let's talk a little bit about chemistry. So chemical processes in soil determine many things, including nutrient availability. They support nutrient storage and release. They promote soil reactions. And they relate to something that's called the cation exchange capacity, which I'll talk about. So soil contains many nutrients. Nutrients have a positive or negative charge, and these are called cations and anions. So think way back to your high school chemistry class. So cations hold positive charges, and anions hold negative charges. So for example, in this image, you can see calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and hydrogen cations. So remember, our smallest particles are clay, right, and humus. So they also both carry a charge, and sand is too big to carry a charge. So humus and clay can hang on to nutrients through their charges. And the surface areas of plant root hairs also contain their own electrical charges. So nutrients are absorbed by plants through cation exchanges. So anytime a plant's root hair penetrates the soil, it may exchange its own cations for those mounted on humus or clay particles and absorb the cation nutrient as nourishment. So plant roots use a hydrogen cation for the exchange, and they eject one hydrogen cation for every cation nutrient absorbed. So this keeps a charge balance. And this is the way that plants eat. So the area within the rhizosphere where these cation exchanges take place is called a cation exchange site. And the number of exchange sites determines the capacity of soil to hold nutrients. So this is called the soil's cation exchange capacity, CEC. Okay, so pH. So what is it? So pH actually measures, you probably know, acidity and alkalinity. So pH is an abbreviation for the power of hydrogen. And the P of pH lets us know the scale is logarithmic, or that instead of counting 1, 2, 3, it would be like counting 1, 10, 100, etc. And the H tells the concentration of hydrogen ions in the solution being measured. So the H positive is a cation. So on a scale of 1 to 14, the center of the scale is 7, which is neutral, and based on the number of ions present in pure water. So each step to the left of the 7 shows an increase by 10 times in the number of hydrogen ions present. a pH of 1 would be very acidic, like battery acid. And then each step to the right shows a decrease in the number of hydrogen ions present. So a pH of 14 would be very alkaline or basic. So if we take an example of water, you see those water molecules there, H2O, we know that water has 2 hydrogens for every 1 oxygen per molecule. A very tiny percentage of those molecules have broken up into hydrogen ions, H positive, and hydroxide ions, OH negative. So when the hydrogen ions outnumber the hydroxide ions, the solution is acidic. And when the hydroxide ions outnumber the hydrogen ions, the solution is alkaline or basic. So why is it important to know your soil's pH? Because of chemistry, because pH affects the availability of nutrients in your soil for plants. So your goal pH for, I'll say the average garden, is usually about 6.5 to 6.8. So that's kind of the soil sweet spot. Unless, of course, you live in the coastal plain, and then you have more acidic soil, which is perfectly okay. So that sweet spot it's where most nutrients are available, as you can see on this chart, and it's where plants and soil organisms do best. So notice the nitrogen at the top. It begins to drop off when the pH hits about 5.5, and phosphorus drops off when the pH is about 6. So the best way for you to buffer your soil pH, whether your pH is too acidic or too basic, is to add organic matter to your soil. Amazing that organic matter is so important to soil. So plants that lack nutrients that are consumed by animals, including people, will not offer as much nutrients to the browsers. And this chart shows the part of the plant that benefits from different nutrients in the soil, as well as the benefit to animals, of course, us, including humans. Oh, one of the best things that you can do for your garden is to get your soil tested. And Rutgers Soil Testing Lab offers homeowners soil test kits where you can collect your own sample and then you mail it in for testing. Yes, you actually mail soil through the Postal Service. So there's the website, and they are currently open for business. They did close down for a little bit, but please do call ahead. Go to the website, get their contact information, call ahead to find out their status as things may change due to the current health concerns. So to learn how to take a soil sample to send it to the lab, I encourage you to visit the Jersey Friendly Yards website. So the Jersey Friendly Yards initiative is spearheaded by the Barnegat Bay Partnership, who Karen Walzer, who provided the introduction. She is the public outreach coordinator for the Barnegat Bay Partnership. And on the website, you can go to the 8 steps to a Jersey-friendly landscape. And then you're going to click on Start with Healthy Soil. And this page links to Rutgers' website, and it offers a 3-minute video showing you how to take a soil sample at your own home. So there's an easy form. There it is. There's an easy form available online at the Rutgers Soil Testing Lab website, or you can call your county's agricultural extension office, and you fill out that form and then send it in with your soil sample. And in some time, you will receive your test results, which will also include a very comprehensive assessment of your soil based on the test you want. And they will also offer recommendations for amendments or enhancements based on the types of plants that you plan on planting. The test results can also offer information about how to not only enhance the beauty of your flower garden, but also the productivity of your vegetable garden or your lawn. So don't treat your soil like dirt. And I'm going to take just another minute or two to talk a little bit more about the Jersey Friendly Yards website. If you go to the Jersey Friendly Plants tab, the third one over, and click on that, you're going to find the Jersey Friendly Plant Database. And here's the Jersey Friendly Plant Database. The page will look like that. If you scroll down, you're going to see, well, plants on the left and the filter system on the right. And this was actually just changed maybe about a week ago. So the filter system is now on the left-hand side and the plant list is now on the right-hand side, but you'll be able to acclimate, I'm sure. Just go back. So the filter system, you can see you have a lot of choices over here on the right, and your goal is to determine the conditions in your own yard and select these conditions in this filter system. And the over 400 plants on the left will slowly start to narrow down until you have a short list of plants that are absolutely perfect for the conditions in your yard. So the first filter is the region you live in. So there's our provinces. We live in the coastal plain. I do, so I would select that one. And then you can see there's additional filters. The next one we're going to select is soil type. So that is sandy. And then I've selected acidic soil. We have acidic or slightly acidic soil here. And the website also includes definitions of all these different terms. Soil moisture is important. So I have well-drained soil in my yard. I want to choose some perennials. I like to plant flowers and I like natives. So I want some plants with either medium or high drought tolerance because I don't have time and I want to conserve water. And then, so on the left-hand side, I'll have a selection of plants. I would click on the name of my plant and some plant details would pop up along with some pretty photos. I would scroll down and I would read a nice description of that plant. It includes lots of information about the plant, including the wildlife value, which is important. And then you can scroll down and read all the different plant details which were contained in those filter system. And I just wanted to leave you with a couple of photos of some beautiful plants that grow well in the coastal plain. You're probably familiar with the Monarda didyma. On the right is Monarda fistulosum, the wild bergamot. And then in the middle on the top is the Agastache foeniculum, the giant hyssop. And then there's the beautiful purple mist flower, which I just love. And it's pollinator week, so I added that photo of the monarch. And then there's the foxglove beard tongue, which just about finished blooming in my yard. So these are some drought tolerant native perennials that are good to plant here in the coastal plain. And then some native trees with some high drought tolerance that are good for the coastal plain. There's a beautiful warbler called a northern parula that's in an oak tree, and this is early spring. And that warbler is benefiting from the caterpillars and other insects that live in the oak tree or supported by the oak. And the trees here are cedar, Juniperus virginiana. And this native plant is providing nesting habitat for this yellow-crowned night heron family. So that's very exciting. That's actually an endangered species here in New Jersey. So that native species tree is providing habitat for that endangered species. And here's another northern parula in a sassafras, another drought-tolerant native tree. And then some drought-tolerant native shrubs. There's beach plum and ninebark and northern bayberry. And then drought-tolerant native grass, this beautiful little blue stem. Makes a lovely addition to a native plant garden. All right, so thank you so much, everybody. And it's 8 o'clock. I am willing to hang on and answer any questions that you may have, and I'll turn my video back on. And hopefully I am still online.
Hey, Becky.
Hey.
One question in the chat was about earthworms.
Okay.
And Kathy asked, what about the invasive earthworms? How bad are they for the soil?
So that's a really good question. And I haven't done extensive research, but I've read a little bit about some earthworms, and I can't tell you what species, but some earthworms that are invasive species in the north, like Wisconsin, Minnesota, are actually eating so much organic matter that insulation for the soil is basically diminished, and that is causing some problems in more northern areas. So that's a really great question, and I encourage you to research that more yourself as well.
The only other set of questions was about the the soil testing, the cost. So, I did answer the chat that it was basic test is $20, but there are some more advanced tests, and they should just go to the Rutgers testing lab website.
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I don't know the prices off the top of my head, but they're all listed on the Rutgers website.
Right. A few people did lose audio partway in, but just to remind everybody, it was recorded, so you will be able to